Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. It's been a long time, and we are so glad to have this starting up again. I know we just got a couple of things to do before we do the piping in, but I know we've missed out on Burns Night, obviously, because of the pandemic. And I'd been thinking at this time of year what I could do to celebrate Burns Night in my own home. What's that? Oh, is that better? Okay. And thinking what I could do. And then I thought about, with Robbie Burns being one of the most famous people in history, what films or movies there might be about him. And surprisingly, there aren't that many. And the few that I found, well, I'll go back to, there are a lot of Scots and a lot of people that believe a Burns film must be made by a Scots person. Must be. And so they had this director who was trying to get it together, and in good Scots fashion, he said, well, to make a film you need a lot of money, and there is no money in Scotland. None. It has to come from somewhere else, and that's just a difficult sell, interestingly enough. But the films that have been made, there's just, I came up, I think, with four quickly. The first one was in 1930. It's a film called The Loves of Robert Burns. It's a British historical musical depicting the Scottish bard, interestingly enough. I'd like to see how that goes. The next film was a 15-minute film made in 1937 called The Romance of Robert Burns. Now, that's not to say he wasn't a romantic in a lot of ways, but it's a story behind the famous song Auld Lang Syne, and it's just a nice short film. Interestingly, there was also a film made in 1970 called Tam Lin, or The Devil's Widow. It's not really well known, but it's adapted from one of Burns's poems, and it's a horror film, interestingly enough. It's inspired by a Scots folk story, and it talks about a man called Tam Lin who is caught and captured by the Queen of Fairies, desperately trying to return to his true human love, Janet. Interesting 1970 film. I have not been able to find that anywhere, but I did read about that. Red Rose, which came out in 2004, it's named after one of the most popular songs of Robert Burns. And the movie shows the poet's life, his struggles, and the storyline revolves around the opposition Burns faced when he openly expressed his views on freedom, slavery, and human rights, interestingly enough. And then the last thing that I found that was done, it's a documentary, and it's called In Search of Robert Burns, and it was done in 2013. And it gives a really great depiction of the life of Robert Burns. It was available on Amazon Prime, but if you want to look that up, if we ever have a gap again, or you just want to celebrate in the dark days of January, you can look those up. Okay, and I think we're ready for the piping in of our performers. that was Cameron Barrett, who usually accompanies us, and we're glad to have him back this year. In celebration of Robert Burns, just a brief bit of history for you. January isn't exactly the most heartwarming of months. It's cold, often snowy and dark, full of kind of the blues. But there's one bright light shining among all the gloom, navigating through the murk to cheerier shores. It's Burns Night. Every year, in the latter half of January, people from all over the world gather in celebration of the great Scottish national poet, Robert Burns. And dinners are hosted from Moscow to Miami, Aberdeen to Auckland, to honor the most prodigal of sons. Toasting the bard is more than enjoying clever poetry and pithy observation. It's a once-a-year stare in the mirror, look at ourselves, and the great contribution from Scottish culture. It also reflects the most Celtic of natures, really a wry understanding that we don't take that pride too seriously. Robert Burns was and is an important historical figure. Around the globe, no one sits down to celebrate a Mozart dinner or a Shakespeare evening. So it seems that Burns' fame has a deeper meaning. At heart, he's a product of the Scottish Enlightenment, a beneficiary of the education system that walked hand in hand with a movement, part of the local economy, more than a mover and a shaker. From a young age, it was clear he was clever. His school friends often asked him to compose poems and ditties to impress their lassies, and that they themselves were after. Not that Burns was fond of fair skin and bumps in all the right places. This was an answer to part of the conundrum. Who, among us, mostly actually enjoyed poetry in school? I remember it seemed to me that teachers were apparently predetermined to choose the most mind-numbingly poets possible for their students to study. Wordsworth, yawn. Shelley, oh boy, what does that mean? And on it goes. But once you get to a ladies' man, you have a whiskey, Burns then became a bit cool. The Scots, even teenage Scots, love their gods to have feet of clay, and no one has slippier feet than Burns, but no one speaks their language better either. Here, for the first time, was a man who not only spoke in the vernacular of the people, but understood their vices and hated the hypocrisy of those who condemned it. No better way is shown than in Holy Willie's prayer, even today. Because even today in Scotland, hypocrites are known as Holy Willies. He was a man he was a hardworking man, an ordinary man that people could identify with. And more importantly, he identified with them. There may have been more technically gifted poets than Burns, but they lacked the all-important ingredient, the ability to connect beyond his own class and contemporaries. From green grove ashes to the Selkirk grace, and a man's a man to Tam O'Shanter, Burns displayed a unique ability to pitch his wares to the audience at hand, whomever it may be. His understanding of the minutiae of people's lives and how they could be parodied sets him apart from among the poets of his time by being humorous and yet serious at the same time. While Wordsworth was wandering blithely about daffodils, Burns was contemplating our place in the world by the simple observation of a louse on a fine lady's head. Wad, I can't do this in my best Scottish accent. Wad some power the gift they give us to see ourselves as others see us. Beat that for your depth of thinking. So we understand why he's popular in Scotland. A man of parts we all identify with. But how did that come to be? And how did the suppers occur? Burns' poems had been published and were gaining fame at roughly the same time as Scotland started exporting her finest commodity, her people. Over the course of the 18th century, Scotland exported hundreds of thousands to America, to Canada, Australia, and across the British Empire. And where these people went, they took Scotland with them. 5 years after Burns' death, some of his friends met on the 21st of January, which is the date of his death, to commemorate the life and times of their friend. They recited his poems, sang his songs, and drank to his health. It was so successful that they agreed to meet again the following year, but on the 25th of January to celebrate his birth. This time, there was a meal, formal toasts and recitals and music. And the first Burns supper was born. It was hugely popular, and Burns clubs and societies appeared all over Scotland. The date became sacrosanct, becoming known as Burns Night. In 1815, Sir Walter Scott organized the first big formal event in Edinburgh, with James Hogg giving the immortal memory. The evening then became ritual, formalized, and firmly ingrained into the national psyche. Outside Scotland, Oxford University's Scottish students held their first formal Burns supper in 1806. In India, the first was held in 1812, and by 1844, both Australia and New Zealand were holding official government-funded Burns' Night. At the same time, the royal family also got in on the act, hosting their own versions, and thus stamping regal royal approval. The event continued to grow, gaining even greater popularity among expats and those of Scottish ancestry in the United States, Europe, Canada, and beyond. Interestingly, particularly in Russia as well. Robert Burns had become the world's greatest posthumous superstar, and arguably remains so. His famous song, Auld Lang Syne, cemented that immortality. The ceremony has hardly changed in over 2 centuries. The immortal memory, the toast to the lassies, the reply from the lassies, tam o'shanter, the piping and recitation of to the haggis, dancing and drinking. Done right and lightly informal, it is the most magical night you can imagine. Who else, dead 200 years, still gets that kind of ovation? Like now to turn to, we have Mary. Oh, not Mary. Oh, it's okay. To Colin. We're going to go to Colin, who's going to play a selection of Scottish tunes.
I'm a person.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Close enough.
Cameron, I'll get this straight. It's been several years, folks. you, Cameron. Now we will have Colin Kerrigan step up and play and introduce your song.
Scottish tunes here. First one is called Crossing the Sea of Ireland, and it's kind of a melancholy waltz, a reflection on migration, which is still a going concern around the world. And Crossing the Sea of Ireland, we pick it up with a Scottish jig called the Seagull, which is about a bird.
Thank you, Colin. Next week, we will have Mary Linus read My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose.
My love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like a melody that's sweetly played in June. So fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I. And I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gang dry. Till all the seas gang dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun. And I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. And fare thee well, my only love, and fare thee well a while. And I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 miles.
Next, we have Rebecca Fetlis, Catherine Harrison, and Tom McNeil singing some Scottish ballads.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and this is Catherine. Hi. And that's Tom, and we're going to start with the ballad Highland Mary. one more. Maybe we'll move over a bit.
By yon bonny, bonny banks, by yon bonny, bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love were ever wont to be, on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be Scotland for you. Me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Well, mind where we parted in yon shady glen, mountain steep, steep, side of and Lomond. And the deep purple hues of the highland we view, and the moon come out in the gloaming. You take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland for you. Me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, wee birdies sing and the wildflowers spring, and the sunshine waters are sleeping. With a broken heart will can no second spring again, and the world does not know our grieving. Well, you take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland for you. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
Thank you. That was wonderful. That was delightful. Next, we have the Highland Dance Group from the McCorkle Academy of Highland Dance. We are quite thrilled to have them here again this year. White hat on. Thank you very much. That was quite fun. I'm looking back for the haggis to be piped in. Annette I see her through the door, so if you will please stand for the piping in of the haggis. So that was not Annette, that was brought in by Tracy and the Cub Scouts, or the Cub Scout, I should say, so thank you for that. Now we'll have the ode to haggis and the toast.
Excuse my Scottish accent tonight. The best I can do is how my grandmother used to yell at me for being too loud, too messy, or too happy. Let's address the haggis. Fair foul your honest, sonsy face, great chieftain of the puddin' race. Abun them, ye take your place, pinch, tripe, derm. Well are ye worthy of a grace, as long's me arm. The groaning trencher there ye fill, your hurdies like a distant hill. Your pin would help to mend a mill in time of need, while through your pores the dew distills like amber beads. His knife see rustic labor dight, and cut ye up in a ready slight, trenching your gushing entrails bright like ony ditch. And then, oh, what glorious sight! Warm, leaking, rich, and horn for horn. They stretch and strive, they'll take the hindmost on they drive, till their will swelled gites belie are bent like drums. The old guidman, mace like arrive, bethank it hums. Is there that o'er his French legout, or oliole a wad stow, or fricassee would make a spew, the perfect schooner looks down with sneering, scornful view on sick a dinner. Poor devil, see him o'er his trash, as feckless as a withered rash, his spindle shank a gid whiplash, his neat a knit. Through bloody flood or field to dash. How unfit. But mark the rustic, haggis-fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread. Clap in his hands, clap in his wally nave a blade, he'll make it whistle. And legs and arms and heads will sneed like taps o' thistle. Ye powers, what make mankind your care, and dish them out their billow fare? Oh, Scotland wants nae stinking ware that gods and luggies. But if ye wish her prayer, her grateful prayer, ye or a haggis. To the haggis.
That's not easy to do. Well done. Absolutely well done. Thank you, Father Ed. Now, if you'll stand, and I meant to have you sit during that last part. Again, it's been a couple of years. We'll get this right. So the singing of Auld Lang Syne, please.
The Selkirk Grace. Some hae meat and canna eat, and some wad eat that want it. But we hae meat, and we can eat. Say, let the Lord be thanked.
So now what we'll do is we'll have the piping out of the haggis, followed by the performers, followed by the first rows back down, and then downstairs. Let's have a wonderful, joyous, memorable evening this evening, and as we continue the festivities. So.